they can put them in the chat. They can
Yes,
add those questions to the chat, and we will ask the speakers at the end of each speaker.
Yes. So any questions you have, just put them in the chat box, and then after the presentation for each speaker, we can address those questions. So the Essex Hudson Greenway, hopefully, you know, things will keep moving along. It's very exciting news, and I've told them that you know, the environmental commissioners in Essex County would be very happy to be involved in the planning. And so you know, look for something next year. Maybe we can have them come and get involved with our commissions around Essex County. So let's see. So our speakers today, we have Dr. Richard Lathrop. I'm sorry, I actually did not ask you if I was pronouncing that correctly. Is that correct?
That was correct. Lathrop.
Yes,
Yeah.
Lathrop. From Rutgers University. He's the director of the Grand F. Walton Center for Remote Sensing and Spatial Analysis at Rutgers University Ecological Preserve. And he's professor of environmental monitoring in the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Natural Resources at Cook's College in Rutgers University. So he'll be presenting in the first half of this hour about the NJ Adapt tools. His research program works to integrate insights of landscape ecology and geography with the application of geospatial information technology to improve the understanding of the structure and function of coupled human environmental systems at broader landscape to regional scales. He works with partners to translate that understanding into effective and appropriate techniques to improve on-the-ground natural resource management and land use planning. And then in the second half, we will be hearing from Sergeant Michael Capodanno and Detective Stephanie Knox from the Essex County Sheriff's Office Fields Operation Unit in the Office of Emergency Management. The ECSO OEM's goal is to mitigate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the effects of natural or man-made disasters and other hazards or emergencies that may occur within our region. The ECSO OEM maintains or facilitates the updating of more than 100 plans, annexes, appendices, and supporting documents that guide preparedness, response, and mitigation activities that can be applied to any disaster or emergency affecting the region. And I'm very much looking forward to both of these presentations. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Let's see. Why is it not letting me do that? It's saying share. No, I do not want to do a new share. Hold on a minute. Why is this not letting me stop sharing? Here we go. Stop share. So Dr. Lathrop, if you could now go ahead and share your screen and let us know about the NJ Adapt tools that you've been working on.
Okay, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak to you all tonight. And so I'm going to.
No.
Okay. Let me adjust that. So I want to talk about our toolkit that we've been developing, but to put it in context, I think some folks need to mute, make sure they mute, is what's going on broader in the state in terms of thinking about resiliency planning. And so this slide is from the state NJDP and thinking about resilient New Jersey, and trying to come up with tools. And some of the tools that I'll talk about tonight are highlighted in this document at the state. So anyone, if you're not familiar with the idea of the increase in greenhouse gas emissions, and so that was heavily in the news this past earlier this month, in terms of the large international meeting taking place in Scotland. And so, what I want to talk about, what are the implications of this, and what can we do to potentially adapt to the results of this greenhouse gas increase, and then what it means in terms of our climate, and more specifically as it relates to forests. And so we've been working with a large group of a team at Rutgers, but also more broadly in terms of the region. And so, you're familiar with the idea of global warming. And so this is a series of maps terms of showing on the left-hand side, kind of baseline conditions, and then the right-hand side, what potential future climate, in this case, future temperatures might look like under some of these different emission scenarios. But it's not just in terms of temperature. Some of the other factors is in terms of increased precipitation, increased intensity of storms, as well as rising seas. And so at Rutgers, we've been thinking about this for a while and thinking about a two-pronged approach. The meeting this past month in Scotland was like, how do we reduce emissions? What we've been focusing our effort on is how can we marshal information and tools to help New Jersey adapt to changing climate. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. And so we've developed a suite of online tools, the idea to try to make it easily accessible to a broad group of constituents, stakeholders. And our first tool was NJ Flood Mapper. And so this we developed well over a decade ago. And that focuses on in terms of sea level rise. But what I want to talk about today is more about what we're calling NJ Forest Adapt, and thinking about where do trees and forests fit into a resilient New Jersey. Okay, and so as part of that larger toolkit, we've thought about different natural resources, flooding effects, in this case, forests. And why are we concerned about forests? You guys are all work as part of the Environmental Commission, which I just saw in terms of polls. So you're probably pretty familiar with how trees, both in a exurban, suburban, as well as urban environment, have a lot of positive impacts, in terms of our environment. And so we're concerned about how do we keep our trees, how do we maintain our forests under climate change, and what are some of the implications? What are some of the stresses on now, and then what are some of the implications, into the future? And so as part of NJ Forest Adapt, this broad team of, from my research center, Center for Remote Sensing, but there's the Office of Research Analytics, our Center for Resilient Landscape, as well as the Climate Institute, and then a number of different outside collaborators from the climate end, from the parks and forestry end, and from the, in terms of the Forest Service. Our goal is to promote climate resilient forests across New Jersey, as well as the broader Northeast region. And part of the objectives was to develop a web GIS portal to enhance place-based decision making. And so that's why you're going to see a lot of maps, is thinking about how place becomes important in terms of context. And then to bring together map data from a diversity of credible and authoritative sources, and then provide links to other information and resources that promote adaptation strategies and case studies. And then to provide access to some of these sources in synthesized takeaway information in a variety of formats. And so the tool itself, NJ Forest Adapt, is broken out into these different themes. And so in terms of climate and climate associated risks, and then more specifically about just kind of the state of our forests, and then some of the potential threats and risks to our forests. We incorporate some background information in terms of tips, how you could use it for a variety of different purposes. One example is from an urban forest context, thinking about how to inform tree planting and forest management under a changing climate. And so again, there's some resources there in terms of how you might go about looking at that. And one of the ways that we think about is climate, and then how translating climate into climate factors that actually relate to trees. And one of those is, for instance, the growing degree days. And so we have, again, maps. Our focus is on New Jersey, but we include a lot of different regional data sets. So in terms of just to focus here, the way it's set up, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you can select growing degree days, and that's why I've clicked on here. And then you can choose in terms of the time period. Are you interested in historical baseline? And then different scenarios going out into the future. And then under moderate or high emission scenarios, the higher the emissions, the greater the climate change and the greater change that you might expect. So growing degree days are just a way that horticulturalists think about climate in terms of how many, it's a weird little parameter, but how many days are hot, have enough heat that plants can grow, in terms of green leaves can grow. And so you can see, more growing degree days as you go further south and less as you go further north. And again, you can choose different scenarios under the high emissions 8.5 or more moderate 4.5 versus historical. And you can look at change. You can look at future time periods. You can also look at change versus baseline. So not the absolute amount, but like the relative change. And so again, growing degree days can be used to estimate growth and development of plants themselves, but also pests. And so we also provide information, if you're not familiar with growing degree days, well, what does this actually mean? But, agriculturalists, foresters, think about this pretty strongly in terms of how it relates to plant growth over a season, but also some of the other pests and the like. And so when it comes to future planning for trees, again, thinking about how successful with the existing tree species under a different climate. Another example is heat zones. And so during the summertime, extreme heat, plants will actually shut down. It'll shut down photosynthesis or slow it down. And so heat zones are another way to think about that extreme and what's the under existing conditions, and again, how might this change into the future? And so heat zone maps are another way. They're basically these different ways that climatologists have taken the general information about temperature and try to come up with parameters that you could actually relate that are more biologically evident. In this case, again, how many days, in this case, above this threshold of 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And this heat zone becomes important in terms of the species suitability range. And again, checking heat zone fitness can help plan forest management into the future in terms of trees, thinking about, again, what trees might be most appropriate. Not just if I got to plant a tree now and I'm hoping that tree is going to live for 50 years, I want to think about what's the climate going to be like in 50 years, not just what it is today. And again, we give various kinds of examples. In this case, Eastern white pine, and we can expect under future change, some species that we are pretty prevalent today here may be less competitively successful into the future. And then you might, in Essex County, in terms of a pretty urban area, concerned about land surface temperature, and so we have maps showing land surface temperature under season, basically at season average, and then at greater detail during the hottest periods during the extreme heat in the summer. So you can start to see some of that spatial variation. Again, redder temperatures, hotter temperatures. And we include a legend as well. And then you can see, well, cooler temperatures, here's the Watchung Ridge. And so where you have more tree cover, you've got cooler temperatures. Where you've got more impervious surface cover, higher land surface temperatures. And then this map, we have a series of maps that look at the distribution of trees now and under future climate change. And so this is looking at Eastern hemlock. New Jersey is at the southern limit of the hemlock, and this is showing it's an importance value. That's what the legend represents, an importance value of the tree. How important or how dominant is that tree, within the forest canopy, in terms of that there might be a suite of other trees as well. And so that's under the present, and then under future, 100 years hence, under a higher emission scenario. And you can see how basically we'll still have hemlock, but it's going to be much lesser amount in our particular forests. But and then this is showing the absolute change. And then other species, in this case, loblolly pine, which we think of as a southeastern coastal species. This is showing it, in through the Delmarva Peninsula, and it just basically barely makes it up to New Jersey. Under future climate change, New Jersey will be a much more suitable habitat for loblolly pine. We have some additional information for people to look at, in terms of which species are going to be winners, which species are going to be losers under future climate change. This is information that the Forest Service has developed. We got a lot of other information about, the existing forest cover, canopy cover across the region, what kinds of forest types we have in terms of coniferous dominated versus deciduous or some kind of mix. So again, kind of the existing state of the forest. This is showing maps of forest pests, and this is the emerald ash borer. And so you're probably familiar with that. And the red areas are the amount, the percentage of the forest biomass, or in this case, basal area, that has been lost or potentially going to be lost from this pest. And it's really affecting our kind of central New Jersey forests and decimating our green ash and white ash populations. But further south in New Jersey, in the Pine Barrens, there's other species, in this case, the southern pine beetle, are affected. Other hazards, and that's kind of the focus tonight, wildfire hazards. Essex County, not as much concern, at least from the trees in terms of wildfire, but down in South Jersey, major wildfire hazards. And then in our coastal zone, as sea level rises, we're getting forest dieback at the edges, that upland edge, coastal edge. And this is showing what areas of forest cover are potentially vulnerable to rising seas. And then finally, what we have then tried to create was called municipal snapshots. So if you're interested in your particular town, we do this by municipality, give kind of the state of the forests in that particular municipality. And so this is all pre-generated and creates a PDF, and you can print that or copy that snapshot. So we have this as well as for the forest, but we've developed a whole other series of different snapshots in terms of built infrastructure, critical assets. For the forest, it's the natural and working lands report. But some of these other municipal snapshots that we've developed as part of our other climate adapt tools might be of interest to you as well. And then you can collect and share maps. So you can take a view, you like the particular view you want to see, you can grab that and share that. And then we have a list to a bunch of other resources in terms of thinking about forest vulnerability to climate change, and some adaptation planning workbooks and to help. And then finally, we try to be as transparent upfront in terms of where we're getting our data. And this particular tool is always evolving, and we continue to grow it and change it. Our NJ flood mapper, like I said before, is well over a dozen years old, and we've, I think we're on version 3 or version 4. And so we're always welcome feedback. And so again, if you just NJ Forest Adapt.rutgers.edu, but if you just say NJ Forest Adapt into Google, you can find it. And this project was supported by the Experiment Station as well as the Department of Agriculture McIntyre Stennis program. So I'll stop my share at this point, and if there's any questions.
Thank you. Yes, please put in questions into the chat. I had a question. I was wondering, are there tutorials where people, because it looks like there's so much and you could just really dive in, and it's a very rich tool.
Yeah, so as part of the upper toolbar, we have some additional tutorials to help you. We've tried to fashion them. It's like, oh, I'm an urban planner interested in thinking about tree cover in my city. How can I use this tool? And so kind of, a workflow. And so we have some there right now, and we are finalizing 2 more that we're going to post before the end of the year. So we'll have some additional resources as well.
And Dr. Lathrop, I had a question also. If the growing degree days if this is showing that could a growing degree days, could that actually help forest growth in New Jersey? In other words, would the season be starting earlier and ending later? And would that actually encourage?
Yeah, so the growing degree days are predicted to increase. So that means we're going to have a longer growing season. And so in some ways that's good. Okay.
Yeah.
In other ways, we're going to have more extreme heat. So that's going to knock out certain species, because a lot of species, if it gets too hot, they can't photosynthesize. And you're going to have warmer winters. And so again, there's going to be, and that's what we try to show in terms of the climate change tree atlas, in terms of some trees are going to be losers, but other trees are going to be winners. And so the idea is to know which ones are potentially winners and plan accordingly. Don't plant a tree that is not going to be suitable for a future climate. Think about, and again, there's resources there to help you think about those kinds of decisions to optimize. Because planting a tree, it's a longer time frame, and it's also a big investment. And it's not just planting the tree, it's the maintaining that tree, which is, it's a big investment. So you want to make it as easy as possible.
Right. Yeah, Ann Marchione wanted to know, do you have to be connected to Rutgers to access this? Karina says, no, you don't.
No, yeah. So the whole idea was this is a web accessible tool that's available to everybody. And so the idea is you don't need special software. It's all, just through your internet browser. So just NJ Forest Adapt, and you have access to all the tools there.
Right. I have another question, if I may, is you said that, some tree species will fall out of the growing community, but then other cooler season species will fill in. You mentioned the loblolly pine. But of course, that then has effects on other species that live in and around the forest, from the insects to the birds, et cetera. Do any of those types of connections and ecosystem, that sort of mosaic, is that in any of that information included in projections in New Jersey Forest Adapt?
Not yet. No, right now it's very simple, species by species. And you bring up a good point. A forest is a whole community in terms of, and the web and the interactions. And so in terms of the state of the science right now is more of looking at each species individually, and not so much how much they interact. And then we can think about some of the risks, some of the hazards, but again, that's looking at them kind of separately, like wildfire hazard, and not from a larger community basis. So there's in terms of the state of the science, and then the use of that in terms of some of these tools are still in a, let's say, beginning stages.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, Barbara Rogers asked, she noted that this information would be good for shade tree commissions around the state. Is there any plan to get this information to them, or do they need to?
We've been working very closely with the New Jersey Parks and Forestry and their urban forest community forest program. So in designing this, and especially like that municipal snapshot was actually with input from them in terms of what kinds of information that they thought would be useful for their partners in the urban and community forest program. And so we try to build that in, but we're always interested in building in, more, trying to make the tool more useful.
That's terrific. Because that is a great resource. And finally, Winifred Victor Hines she says, good evening to you, but she asks all of us, are we familiar with the 3 forest management bills, A 4843, 4844, and 4845 that went before the Assembly Appropriations and Senate committees, I guess just recently? Do you know about those bills? Do you have any opinion of those bills? Does any of any commissioners have any information about that?
I'm not exact. I know that there's been different forestry bills through. I'm not familiar with the numbers that I can attach the number to the titles.
Yeah, it was pertaining to forest stewardship, and some of the environmental groups, opposed it, like New Jersey Forest Watch and then Highlands Coalition.
Yeah.
So they were, yeah. I
So
don't know if you're familiar with it.
I am familiar with that. And there's 2 camps on this. Okay. Corinna, who's on the call, is kind of like a different opinion than myself on certain aspects of this in terms of thinking about forest management. And so there's one school is like, just leave the forest alone. And another school as well, in some cases, we may have to proactively manage the forest to make it more resilient. And part of that management might be cutting trees to increase the diversity of age classes of those trees or plant some new species there. And so, as well as to increase the habitat diversity. So there's two kind of schools that are kind of duking it out there in terms of thinking about forests and how we, what's the best way. I think we're both want to sustain forests into the future, but how do we do that? And I started the talk with a list of all those values, those ecosystem service values of forests, and depending on how you manage, you can manage for some or others, or try to hit some sweet spot for all of them.
Yeah, because there's so much information, and like you said, the different camps. So one is getting, different messages from, for and against. So it's hard to come to a decision, especially if you're not that familiar with it. So right now I'm trying to increase my knowledge on the topic, but still, it's a lot to take in.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Great. That's terrific, Dr. Lathrop. I have one last question I want to just ask you quickly. That you mentioned that South Jersey wildfire threat looked very significant in South Jersey. Is that primarily the Pinelands?
Yes. Yeah, primarily Pinelands. There's more active prescribed burning down there because of the higher wildfire threat. There is more prescribed burning that people are actually doing in our northern forests that has increased through time. And it's not like we don't have wildfire hazard in some of our northern forests, but it's not quite as severe as because we have a different, there's less in terms of the evergreen cover in our northern forests than.
Right. And finally, Barbara Rogers wraps up by saying this information would be important for tree farmers. Is this information also provided to the ag community around the state?
Yes, it is in terms of the forestry community. And then we are developing a separate suite for like NJ Farm or Ag Adapt, and again, trying to come up with customized focus tools to hit different groups. A lot of it is based on the same climate data. It's all based on that same climate data, but trying to make it relevant for different resource groups.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lathrop.
Thank you.
That was very interesting.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate
Thank
the
you very much. And now we have Detective Stephanie Knox and Sergeant Michael Capodanno from the Essex County Sheriff's Office Field Operations Unit, Office of Emergency Management, who are going to talk to us about the, what exactly is it called? I'm blanking on it. I have it written down here. The
Hazard mitigation plan.
Yes. Thank you. So you can go ahead and share your screen and
You gotta put the PowerPoint on.
Yeah, The share button is not great.
Not working?
Do we have access, Sheila?
Sorry?
Do we have access to share the screen?
Yes, you should. Let's see. Your Essex OEM is co-host, so you should be able to share. If not, I believe I have your presentation.
Yeah, for
so
some reason the share button is grayed out.
strange. Why don't I hold on a second. I'm gonna,
Yeah, if you want.
We saw it earlier, right?
yeah, so I'm remaking you co-host to see if that will help. And if not, I can go ahead and pull up your presentation.
Let's see if I can share it.
Does that work now?
Yeah, no, for some reason the where it says share on the screen will not won't let us share it.
All right, I will go ahead and share your presentation.
Yeah, sorry
then
about
it-
that. I don't know why.
Not at all. And if you could just go ahead and you could say, next slide or something like that.
Sure. Okay, so just to start, the doctor brought up a lot of good points. When it comes to climate change and weather emergencies, which obviously come with the climate change, and some things that we look to mitigate is flooding, right? And flooding comes from weather events, climate change. And with the deterioration of trees, with the deterioration of other land that we have, especially in the urban areas, we see that as a growing need to look into and to try and find solutions for. So as part of these mitigation plans, and again, I know some people spoke about not understanding who their emergency managers are in their towns or in the county. I think that's an important role, right? Because we try and engage with the public to try and get some more information out. What I will say personally is, after being in law enforcement for over 25 years, I will tell you 25 years ago, I never thought I would worry about the trees, right? Or flooding events and that type of thing. When I was in the police academy, I never thought to myself, I'm going to be running around during a weather emergency and worry about people's houses flooding. And here we are now, right? And trying to do this as a community all together, right? When it comes with the people that live in the communities and then the different agencies within that. So it's very important that throughout this whole thing, we have to remember that we have to all be engaged in this, and we have to come together to solve some of these problems that we have. So when we're looking into these mitigation plans, how can we correct problems that we foresee being issues? And then how do we have some type of resolutions to try and correct that? So as part of this, we're going to go through our plan and kind of how we do it. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to go over some of the mitigations that we're trying to fix, right? And then of course, any questions that you have, we'll answer. So if you can go to the next slide. So, all right, well, this is just some types of things we're going to talk about in here. Why is this important? And again, we'll bring this up later on through the slides here. What is our process? What are the overviews, right? So what is our current plan? And then how do we update those plans, and when do we update the plans? So these plans that we have are very recent. We just did these again in 2020. For some reason on the screen here, it says 2014 update. That's a little bit of an older one. That was the last one we did. It's been updated. We now have a 2020 plan. We'll talk a little bit about the strategies and what we're looking to achieve. And then we'll talk about the requirements and timelines. And obviously we'll have questions and answers, and we'll go from there. You can go to the next one. All right, so what is actually this mitigation plan, right? What we're looking to do is take some type of action and reduce or eliminate long-term risks, right? And that, whether that is with property or life safety, during a hazardous event, right? So typically we try and do these mitigation projects and these plans prior to, and then we'll try and prepare and prevent them as much as possible prior to an event. And the more that we can prepare for, the more that we can mitigate that, whether it has to do with building more bridges over roadways, or taking care of dams, or doing any type of sewer system upgrades, those type of things that we're really lacking on that we haven't touched in a lot of years. And I'm sure we're all familiar with seeing the infrastructure, not only within the state, within the county, but within the whole United States. It's actually, we haven't kept up on it, and this is something that we're trying to get ahead of. And we're making some progress. Unfortunately, it's not going as quickly as I think it should go, or as smoothly as I think it should go. But we're doing what we can to try and reduce the risks of any type of hazard that we may get from either a weather emergency or potentially a man-made emergency, which we'll talk a little bit about as we go through this. Next. So this just talks a little bit about why mitigation works and how it works. Again, any plan you have in place prior to an event happening tends to save money in the long run. If you could eliminate or try and alleviate houses and structures from being flooded out prior to that happening, obviously then that saves money. So this screen just talks a little bit about flooding and the surge and what it would cost prior, and then what it would cost after. So it just kind of gives you a ratio of, if the mitigation wasn't in place, we'd typically spend $5, per thousands on rebuilding, as opposed to just $1 on fixing up, minor things that may have happened. Now, we also get obviously a lot of funding and federal funding and state funding through these grant projects. So it doesn't necessarily come straight out of taxpayers' money through the county. I guess everyone pays a part throughout it, to be honest, but a lot of it doesn't come from taxes. So taxes doesn't get raised typically when we do these projects. That's a little bit above my pay grade, so I'm not going to talk much more about that. But typically we do get a lot of grant funding in order to fund these projects to make them better. Next. Again, good stuff.
Some of the benefits of mitigation, it increases the understanding of hazards faced by Essex County and also the jurisdictions within Essex County and also neighboring counties. Building more sustainable and disaster-resistant communities increases the quality of life for those living in those communities. And like the sergeant said, a lot of our infrastructure is not prepared for some of the weather events that we've been having recently. So you think about, like, I never thought that I would, live through a tornado, but I was in Springfield and I watched a tornado ride by me on Route 22. So that's something that I never thought I would see, but now we're seeing it more in our area. And like even Ida with the flooding situation, we had areas in Ida that flooded that were not prone to flooding. And a lot of that comes with the sewer system and the way the infrastructure is built. It wasn't built to sustain that amount of water in that short period of time. And we're seeing more flash floods than we were seeing maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And that's some of the things that we identified in the plan, and we'll update again in 4 years. We update the plan every 4 years. So every 4 years, you'll kind of look at all of the weather events and everything that has occurred and update our plan so that we can develop projects that can help to mitigate and reduce the risk of something like that happening again. Next slide. A lot of the funding for our mitigation planning comes from the pre-disaster mitigation grant. So we apply for this PDM, we call it. We use a lot of acronyms in OEM, but the pre-disaster mitigation grant will apply for that, and they give us a certain amount of money so that we can hire a company. The company will come in, and the company basically sits down with every municipality, and they have like a committee, and they determine what issues they've had over like the past 4 or 5 years. They also have another program, which is the HMGP. That program will help to fund specific projects. So like the PDM is to develop the plan, but the HMGP is for mitigating the projects that are identified in your hazard mitigation plan. Next slide.
All right, so this just talks about building the plan, right? How do you build the plan? How do you come up with this, you know, through working together with the people, right? So what we do is, you know, we have to figure out, okay, who are we going to include in this, right? What is their assessment of it? What is their capability? We'll typically update their risk assessment, update their mitigation strategies, and then obviously we will include opportunities for not only the local municipalities and the local government, but then we also bring in public comment. So we allow time for them to come in, whether it's in person or whether it's online via surveys. And we look to get information and some type of buy-in from them as well. We like to hear what they have to say because let's face it, right? They are the most important people, the people that live in the towns or in the areas that are prone to these problems, right? They have the most stake in this. It's their houses that potentially could, you know, consistently get flooded, right? So how could we, as a government agency, right, or as a government, fix that for them, right? How could we help them build better, right? We should be helping the people. That is us. That's what we all should be doing, helping each other. But we need to find a way to come together then and make this work for each other. So as part of this, that's why we like to not only include just the administrators of the towns, but we have to include the public. It's one of the most important things, in my opinion, because we do need buy-in from them, right? Because we should all work together the best we can. And then what we do is just update the plan, right? So as this plan evolves, we'll talk a little bit about it later, but we'll come a plan. We'll find out what needs to be done first, what projects are most relevant, what need to be done, you know, initially, and then we kind of come up with a plan on how to make that happen. And then hopefully in the end, we make it happen and move on to the next. Sometimes that's easier said than done because sometimes it does involve doing things that is not good for some people, just don't like. Unfortunately, when it comes to flooding, sometimes we may have to build in or open up roadways, right? Or we may have to dig up some type of foresty area. And unfortunately, that sometimes comes with taking trees down, right? And that's something we don't like to do unless we have to, and it makes sense. So sometimes it does get a little bit tough. There's a little bit of turmoil in there when it comes to that. But listen, we do what we can to make it work and to make the best happen out of it. You can go to the next one. This just talks about our planning process. We have a plan. We do a risk assessment. We have a company come in and they actually do the risk assessment for us. We come up with all of this paperwork and documentation, and then we try and get the public to intervene, right? We try and get their information into it. Then we meet with all the emergency managers, and then we come up with a mitigation plan, which we have a temporary mitigation plan or a draft plan. We take that draft plan, we make sure everyone gets a copy of it, review the plan, any changes get made, and then we update the plan if needed. If it doesn't need updating, then we'll just move on to the next phase, which is developing and monitoring, and then we evaluate it. It does take some time. It does not happen overnight. This takes months.
Years.
All right, potentially years.
We started, I think we started it in 2017, and it was adopted in 2020.
So this is 3 years in the making, right? So there's a lot of time spent on this, a lot of working hours, a lot of meetings, a lot of dealing with the towns meeting with the county meeting with the state. Because as you know, we have town roads, we have county roads, we have state roads. So there's a lot of integration in this. It's not only a local plan, it's a county plan, it's a state plan, it's a federal plan. There's a lot of different entities that get involved in this. And then what we do eventually is we'll start scheduling work, right? So if we know that there's a bridge that needs to be rebuilt, possibly higher, maybe we need to raise it, you know, we'll schedule the work and we'll move forward from there. Next. Let's just talk real quick about the organization of the team and who we have on the team, right? So this may give you a little bit of insight on who the county OEM people are, and then we'll talk a little bit about the towns. But the lead county OEM coordinator is the sheriff, right? Sheriff Fontoura. He is our OEM coordinator.
And our boss.
And our boss. So he pretty much runs the county OEM. All right. So through this, he was pretty much the lead in this. Our contractor and our consultant was Tetra Tech. They're the ones who actually came in and helped us write the plan. We have a steering committee that kind of guide us through what the plan is, what type of projects we should be working on, kind of keep us in place. Then also on the team, we have the municipal representatives, right? So that would be your local OEM people. So the county has an OEM coordinator, and then every town has its own OEM coordinator. Sometimes they have deputy coordinators, and we all work together when it comes to any type of emergency within the county or within the town. But sometimes events don't grow as big as going to the county. So it may only be localized to a town. For instance, if water levels rose and the issue was just in a town like Fairfield, then that would be a Fairfield type of issue, right? So we wouldn't really involve any other towns, but a lot of times Fairfield, just using them as an example, would then call us, the county, and then we would aid them as necessary, whatever they needed, right? We would help them out any way we could. And then we have the stakeholders, which are local people, people that live in town, the residents.
Critical facilities.
Any critical facilities, whether you have hospitals in your towns that you live in, whether you have any type of business owners, plant manufacturers, things like that. All right, those are all people that we bring into the loop, because it's very important not only to have the residents, but we need to have the businesses involved in this as well. Again, this is an approach to bring everybody in to be at the same table, right? It's everyone has a little bit of insight into it, and everyone gets to voice their opinion, and then collectively we make decisions, right? No one person in this makes a decision. That's very important to understand. This is a collective committee. This is a team of all people. Again, residents, businesses, and then agencies, and we come up with a decision together collectively.
It's called a whole community approach.
Next
slide.
This talks a little bit about the steering committee. I'm not going to go down through all of these right here, but as you could see, there's a lot of different partnership in here. There's a lot of different people that bring their knowledge to the table, and we welcome that. We have people from the DPWs of the towns and from the counties. We have fire agencies. We have police agencies. We have volunteers and the CERT team members that come out. And then obviously we have hazmat people, bomb people. We have a lot of different agencies that get together through this, and we have a lot of discussion on what projects are important and what's important to them in their community. Because let's remember, something that's important to, say, a city of Newark might not be as important to a town of Essex Fells, right? Because they're on totally opposite ends of the counties and they have different priorities within the town. So we have to take that into account as we go through this, right? Totally different ends of the spectrums, right? Perfect. So what we do here, oh yeah, that's fine, thank you. So what we do here is when we bring the jurisdictions in, we kind of submit letters, right? We submit letters to them. We want them to send letters to us. Yeah, you want to jump in? Yeah.
So every municipality is invited to participate in the hazard mitigation plan process. They are not required to. So they can create their own hazard mitigation plan on their own, or they can participate in the county plan, you know, for no cost because we receive money through the grant, and they will have their own annex, which is basically a chapter in the county plan. So every municipality participated in this plan, but they're not required to, they're invited to. So that's why they submit the letters of intent to participate. So then we have, oh, keep going, all right, fine. So then we have meetings and workshops, and basically we will have a meeting based upon discipline. So depending on if it's a weather event or an environmental event, then we'll invite certain stakeholders that'll be on that specific committee. And maybe it's like a more response, law enforcement, fire, EMS type event, and then we'll have a different breakout group with those participants just to get different opinions maybe on the same topic. And, you know, I think people will speak better when they're around, I will say, you know, people that they have, you know, maybe more in common with. So then Tetra Tech, the company that was hired, they compile all of this data, and we post the plan online and try to get feedback from the public and the stakeholders. So, you know, when we post things online, I think we put a couple of ads in the paper just to let people know that, like, hey, we're updating the plan. Check it out if you can and see if there's anything that you think should be added or subtracted. And we leave it up for, there's like a certain amount of days that you have to have it posted. And we take all the feedback back and go back and work on our draft. And it's an ongoing process. Like I said, it takes a couple of years between the required meetings. All of these requirements are mandated by the state and federally mandated, just so that everybody is basically going through the same process, and there's no, you know, there's no difference between different counties or, you know, different municipalities. Everybody has to go through the same process in order for their plan to be approved. And then the governing body, so each municipality adopts their annex to the plan, and then the county as a whole adopts the plan through resolution. And then also, you know, it is then sent to the state, and the state approves the plan. So it's a very long process, but you learn a lot, and it's very important to identify any hazards so that we can mitigate them and try to reduce whatever risk we can have or any effects from these disasters that can occur. All right, next.
All right, so this just talks a little bit about the documentation, right? Every town has their own kind of pages, we'll say, little inserts, and we kind of go through the town, right? And we talk about the population of the town, the amount of square miles that the town is, what is the risk of a flood, what is the risk of a tornado, you know, how many buildings are in the town, how many houses are in the town, and then of course, what is the major issues within that town, whether it again be flooding, whether it be wildfires, maybe potentially some type of terrorism event, things like that. And this is all again going to be documented within the annex of the town. You know, the next one. And this screen just talks about the local planning team, right? So we have the county planning team, and then it moves on obviously to the local planning team. And this is just some examples of people that are asked to be on the team. So any obviously mayor, any type of administrators within the town, obviously are always asked to be on that. Public work director, always someone from Public Works is on there. They know the ins and outs of the sewer system or the stormwater system. And of course, any type of foliage and land what the land use is there, which is obviously very important. When it talks about building code officials, that is important to know, because we do live in Essex County, we do live in northern New Jersey here, and there are a lot of businesses in these towns, that make certain kind of chemicals, which is very important to know. So we need to figure out if your town has these, we'll say, chemical factories, and then what we would need to do in the event something was to happen, right? So this is all part of the mitigation plan, right? This is all part of if something happens to that area or to those buildings, what we need to do to solve the problem that it may be. Next. Again, this is just going to talk about conducting a risk assessment, right? So when we do this, and again, we have some help in doing this, we describe what the hazards are. And again, it's very detailed of what the hazards might be and what the percentages are of these hazards coming, right? So what is the likelihood? So we take into account, and I'm just going to use storms as an example, the 100-year storm. How often now is a 100-year storm coming around, right? It's no longer 100 years, right? It seems to be a lot sooner. So we take that into account as we're describing these hazards and trying to figure out. And then we figure out what the community assets, right? What the community has and what they could do locally to potentially aid in this, right? And then we'll analyze it. Sorry about that. And then we do a whole summary on that, right? Fairly simple. Just some of the hazards that, and again, this is just a handful of them that we pulled out of the plan over the last few days as we were going through this. So you can read through that. I'm not going to take each one individually, but these are some of the identified natural hazards, right, that we have in our plan now. So the first one that talks about erosion and sea level rise. Some people may think, well, we don't live anywhere near the ocean. What are we worried about that for? Well, we have a problem in Newark with the Newark Bay, and during storms now, the sea level rises in the Newark Bay, and now this pushes the water into Newark, and then we have a lot of flooding in Newark. And the doctor brought something up very, very interesting before about sea level rise and the way that the water comes in, and then obviously it drowns out the trees and messes up any type of forestry that you may have. Well, this is a concern, and that's why we have it on here. So, when I originally was looking at this, I said, what the heck is this about? Coastal erosion. What are we worrying about in Essex County about coastal erosion? And then I realized, oh boy, look, North Bay, right? The Hudson, North, it comes up, and we have a lot of problems, and it seems to be getting more and more, unfortunately, with these larger storms that we have. We all know our tropical storms and our hurricanes have been coming through. Our rainstorms that we have seem to be getting more and more frequent and more severe. So, everyone has their own take on weather emergencies and weather things. I see the trend in something's going on, and I'll leave it at that. Especially when it comes to the extreme temperatures, right? I can remember as a kid having a nice fall. We didn't have to worry about wearing jackets all the time. Now it just gets from hot to cold. So something's going on in the environment, and I think it's a matter for us to try and figure this out. So that is, again, all part of this. Severe weather, again, that's something that we deal with quite often and more often within Essex County here. The last thing, and I'm not quite sure you can see it on the slide here, all the way on the bottom. And again, the doctor talked a little bit earlier about wildfires, and of course, this part, we're not as likely to see this. It is something to keep in mind, though, that wildfires are in our mitigation plan, and the reason why it's in there is specifically because of the reservations that run out through Essex County, through Milburn, through West Orange, right? South Mountain Reservation is very large, and that is a concern to us, not only because obviously it is a large wooded area, it would be the infrastructure that runs around it and sometimes through it. and how would we be able to fight a fire when we don't have the capabilities of doing that? How do we get water to the middle of South Mountain Reservation if we don't have water lines there, or we don't have a fire road that leads back there? So this is all part of maintaining fire roads. And again, potable water. You know, how do we get fire trucks back into the reservation if we don't have access to get into that? All right. So these are all things that, again, that we look at through these plans. Some of the non-natural, we'll say, events that we have, again, we kind of have them on here. You know, we did see throughout the summer, unfortunately, some civil disorder. We saw that throughout the country. So that is a concern. That's always going to be a concern, especially when you know, we live in urban areas, and not that this is prone only to urban areas, but we tend to see it more there. So we have to keep this in mind, right? This is just something, again, that's in our plan of how we are going to respond to this. Cyber attack, that's something big that we see coming up more and more through all mitigations throughout the whole country. Some new things we have on there is economic collapse. And again, years ago, I would say, what the heck are these people talking about? Economic collapse. You know, how is this going to happen? You know, unfortunately, we saw when the government all shut down through COVID, we saw that beginning to happen, right? So these are things now that we're starting to plan for more and more, and we're keeping a closer eye on that. And again, this is all part of these new plans that we're coming up with every year, right? You can go to the next slide.
Next slide. Okay, and we have about 5 more minutes.
Yeah, so I'm
Okay.
trying to kind of go through it real quick.
All right. There we go.
Yeah, sorry, it's long-winded here.
Right.
Go to the
You could skip this one, and that just
Skip
talks
this one?
about the establishment of it. This just talks about how we review the critical facilities. That has to do with any kind of power plants, hospitals, those types of things. The water systems within the towns and the county, those types of things, right? Lifelines. You know, how do we keep roads open? If there is a flood, how are we still able to keep roads open, going to and from hospitals? Those types of things. You can go to the next one. You can go to the next one. We'll kind of skip through some of this. This just talks a little bit more about mitigation, our strategies, about connections for vulnerabilities, risk and assessments, you know, versus the mitigation and how we come to those conclusions from it. You can go next because there's a couple other things I kind of wanted to get to real quick before we had to end here. This talks about our strategy, what our goals are, right? What the outcomes we really want to achieve. That's the main thing. We have to have a plan, right? And that's more important for everyone, even on this call, to think about. You have to have a plan prior to things happening. You know, in schools, you're used to always having fire drills. Well, these are plans you need to do in your house, right? We try and bring this out. It's very, very important to have a plan prior to something happening, because you don't want to have to come up with a plan when something's already going on, right? So we really try and push out prior to storms, prior to weather events, getting stuff ready, having candles, having some other type of heating sources, having some water left around for you, those types of things. You can go to the next one. I hate to speed through this.
go to the next one.
Next. The mission statement. A lot of this stuff is online as well, so if you ever have any questions, you could go right to that. Next, because I just want to get to one of the problems. This just talks about public outreach. On our website, we have a lot of information on there. It talks about our updates. It talks about the mitigation plan. This talks about how we did like Survey Monkeys, and we were, you know, people were able, citizens and residents were able to go on there and to take surveys, to put their input into it, which is very important. Bilingual, doesn't matter, you know, what type of language that people spoke within the county. This was in plenty of different languages, and if there was any issues, people would reach out to us, and we would make it available in whatever language people needed in it, right? We try and make sure, no matter where you're from, what your background is, you're able to participate in this. Let's just talk a little bit about that next. So real quick, I just want to talk real quick about this. this one in particular. So one of the big problems that we all understand, flooding, right? So we come up with, okay, what is the big issue? Flooding have to be one. And then what is our solutions going to be here, right? So we have to talk about flooding. It's easy to say, oh, just raise the banks or just move a few houses out of the way. Yeah, that doesn't work, right? So you have to conduct studies to evaluate what we are going to do to fix the issue. So studies get done over a course of weeks, months, sometimes years, and how we could evaluate this. How can we fix drainage problems? Can we make sewers larger? Could we stop building up more? Do we have to, will it come to a point where we have to stop building because we have no more land, right? Because obviously, where is this groundwater going? If it can't seep into the land anymore because now a building's onto it, where is the water going? And I think we see this throughout. I can tell you personally, I've never flooded in my life up until this last storm. And now I notice my whole street's getting underwater every time it rains, right? Why is that happening? So that all has to do with, the mitigation. Like, why is this happening, right? What is causing this? And then how do we alleviate the problem? And then we update any kind of open space plans, right? To kind of identify where the issues are. And then we kind of move on to the towns and we kind of get together with the towns and then try and work it out together. Next. This talks about droughts and wildfires, something we don't talk about too often. And again, I put this in because it was kind of like out of the ordinary.
Well, these are actual projects that are in the mitigation plan that were identified during the risk assessment. So these are actual projects that we plan on working on before the next plan update.
Okay, this just shows another thing that we're working on. Again, just problem, right? Droughts, wildfires, and again, I never realized I would have to know where all the underwater water storage tanks are, right? Who would have known? I would have figured that out in my career here, right? How many? Yeah, and what happens if the power goes out, right? And they can't power them anymore, and then the towns start not having water, right? So these are all things that we know are issues, and then how are we going to solve them? Listen, I wish I could snap my fingers and make all this stuff work right again. Unfortunately, there's a lot of work that goes in behind that. And next, which is just going to be questions. I know we kind of sped through that. I know we kind of went through that rather quickly at the end. I apologize for that. Sometimes we start talking and it just keeps spiraling.
Oh, thank you.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Sergeant Capodanno and Detective Knox. We do have a bunch of questions, so let me jump right in with them. Karina Schaefer asked, is Essex County going to be able to tap into some of the federal funding from this new infrastructure bill, the National Infrastructure Bill, in order to help improve the infrastructure to become more resilient for floods and hurricanes in Essex County?
Sure. So anytime federal grants or federal money becomes available, the county, and I will tell you, county exec is very forceful when it comes to this. He is very hands-on. So him along with the sheriff, they really they will get every penny out of what is offered and what would be allotted to the county. They're relentless, we'll say.
Good.
One of the benefits of our update of our hazard mitigation plan is that all of those problems that are identified or projects that are already identified are approved by the state. So it's easier for us to get funding because we already have identified projects.
Okay, great. Barbara Rogers asked, are all towns required to have an OEM plan? I think you explained that the answer is yes. All municipalities must and do have an OEM plan. John Crasting asked, how soon in the process does the county start seeking public input when you're formulating a hazard mitigation plan?
It's fairly quick. So after we do, I think it's the second meeting where we invite the public. So let's just say it's conceptual for like the first, I would say 6 months. And then we start having meetings every 3 months. So probably about 1.5 years into, we start introducing the public.
Great. What about the balance? Janine Salvador from Montclair asked, what's the balance and how is the responsibility for mitigation divided between the county and the municipalities?
So the municipalities develop their own, identify their own mitigation issues, and then they will pass it up to the county. The county deals with things that affect multiple jurisdictions. So say it's 3 or 4 towns or more than one town, then that now becomes a county issue. Whereas if it's something specific to Montclair, then Montclair will identify the issue. And then if they need support from the county or the state, we'll gladly support them in pointing them in the right direction so that they can get everything they need to get it mitigated.
Great. And Lyle Landon, also from Montclair, asked, what are the most urgent emergencies that face municipalities? Do you have a sense of that?
So go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to talk.
Okay.
We basically deal in all hazards, but right now it's been mostly weather events. Prior to COVID, I mean, COVID is his own animal, but mostly weather events. So flooding has been huge, I would say, this go around, and the winter storms that we've had. So we've had like nor'easters and hurricanes. So mostly weather events.
Right. John Crasting asked, what is the history for the countywide approach and its relationship with the municipalities? I think you maybe just touched on that, but he asks, what was this originally a bottom-up effort? For instance, different towns starting out on their own and self-organizing, or was this envisioned as a top-down effort organized first at the county level?
So it's federal. So there's a federal from the Stafford Act. They developed, it's the Incident Commander NIMS, they call it National Incident Management System. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So the hierarchy for OEM was established in NIMS, I think shortly after 9/11. So am I correct, right?
Yeah, so what happens is with these types of plans, with these types of things, it always starts on a federal level and it kind of works its way down. So it's really a top-down approach, but then
Emergencies work from the bottom up.
emergencies would work down up.
Is that confusing?
Okay. Great. And our co-chair Ann Marchione asked, do you have a website, or can you tell us the website that shows the plans that you're currently working on?
We do. So on the if you go to Essex County,
Sheriff.com.
EssexSheriff.com. The plan is on there. We did notice earlier, for some reason, the draft plan was still on there. The new plan wasn't uploaded for some reason.
So that draft plan is the new plan. It's just still, because when we post it initially, it's under draft because it hasn't been approved yet. It's approved now, so it's no longer a draft, but we just need to change the wording.
I see. And I will say that Jennifer Duckworth from Milburn has posted a link. I think that's what you're talking about. EssexSheriff.com /OEM / all hazard mitigation plan.
Yep.
Okay, great. And Winifred asked, Wequahic Park Lake is a designated tertiary water source. Is there anything the organization's working on in the park should be doing to make sure the lake isn't contaminated or is in better condition?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that.
I can get her one though.
We could get an answer. I know that we looked as part of this, especially due to all the flooding from the last storms. We have taken a greater look into the waterways, and there was some things that came up throughout that. With the DEP, this last storm, as you know, was a little bit tough on us, everybody, and that kind of escalated a lot of this, the rivers and the waterways throughout the towns. That is something, again, that we'll have to revisit. I would love to give you an answer, but I don't have an answer for you.
Okay, and I see that the County Environmental Coordinator, Tara Casella, has responded actually and said that the Essex Parks Department is always working on lake management issues, and in recent talks, maybe partnering with Montclair State University to improve the health of county lakes, such as improving the quality and overall health of Essex County lakes and ponds. So that's part of it. Winifred, you can connect with Tara, and she may have more information then.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
I have one question myself, which is, so really what we've been talking about is mitigating the hazards. Is there any county operational planning and policies and procedures for mitigating the cause of the hazard? In other words, setting up planning and infrastructure which will reduce our increasing climate problem. In other words, the Essex Commission has heard me say it's a little bit like we're in a boat, a rowboat that's sinking, and we're desperately with our hazard mitigation trying to bail out the boat, but we haven't fixed the leak at the bottom of the boat that is causing the flooding. And as much as we try to bail out the boat, we're never going to get it bailed out because we have this increasing problem. Are the county departments working together to find ways to reduce our carbon footprint, to reduce our emissions, to make our infrastructure more efficient, changing the source of fuels that we use to run our buildings and our vehicles, and building infrastructure and planning for the transformation in automobiles that we're seeing? Is that being taken into account by the county? Because as much as we try to solve the problems of flooding or forest fires or rising seas, unless we get to mitigating climate change, we're going to always be fighting a losing battle. Do you have a set? I mean, does the Office of Emergency Management, working with other departments and the county executive's office, to work on these types of things?
So I can't say specifically, but I will say that there has been talk about doing that, right? How can we, as a county or as a town, depending on where you live, try and right the ship, right? So I know there has been talk about it. I can't say specifically that, we're all going to go to electric cars within the next 10 years. I don't know. And again, I don't want to misspeak, and I don't want to put any words in anybody's mouth. But I know that that is something that comes up of how we could do better, right? Whether it's redoing a high school and possibly putting a lot of solar panels on the roof, right? Which would help with energy consumption. And I know that does happen. So, those are some types of things. I know that there is a lot to do with planting new trees as much as we can. I know that was big in the county, and the county exec was really pushing for it. I will say that when we discuss building new county buildings, a lot of thought goes into how could we reduce the footprint of that. And again, whether that's with solar panels or certain type of roofs where maybe we could grow on top, right? For like, different types of produce. I know that comes into account a lot, but is it talked? I don't know. I know it's talked about. Is it getting done every day? I don't know. Unfortunately, over the last year, we have all kind of went off rail a little bit, unfortunately, due to COVID. And I'm not using that as an excuse. But I'm confident that is in the forefront of all the administrators' minds. I know that's something we do talk about and discuss. Is it being done on an everyday basis? That I don't know.
Great. Well, thank you both very much. That's the last of the questions. Sheila?
Yes, thank you. And I wanted to say, you were saying that you don't want to use COVID as an excuse, and it's kind of an excuse for all of us for a lot. But being in Essex County, I have to tell you that Essex County has done such a great job, because I talk to people around the state and my family and friends, and I know that that you guys have had it really in hand up here, and you've done a really good job in that response. So I appreciate that. And so thank you to you both, and thank you, Dr. Lathrop, for your presentation on the NJ Adapt tools. And hopefully we can get you to present to at NJEC to our environmental commissioners there, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who would love to get their hands on those tools. So at this point, we're going to move into our roundtable. It'll be abbreviated because I'll still get you out of here at 8 o'clock. But I'm going to share my screen now. And I don't know if you guys recalled, we sent around to, let's see. Can you guys see that? Is it showing? Yes, is it showing? It's sharing. Okay, move it along. We sent around a survey to find out, to ask some questions about the various municipalities around Essex County. And we've had responses from 8 of them, from Verona and Montclair and Maplewood, North Caldwell, Caldwell and West Caldwell, Irvington and Milburn. So I'm just gonna show you a little bit of what we've found out from among these 8 communities. And then we can go around the virtual room and find out what is going on in your communities, find out what kind of projects you're working on, what kind of challenges, what kind of help you might want in the challenges that you're facing. So let's see. So first of all, we had some questions about whether or not there are shade tree commissions. So there was a minority had shade tree commissions, but the majority have, at least the ones that have responded, have tree ordinances. Half have conducted a tree inventory, and half have a tree expert on staff. And let's see, so we're asking about the green building checklist. And so we have, half of them do not have a green building checklist. And then there's a quarter who have a resolution. Oops, sorry, my computer screen is very sensitive. Where are we? So they have a suggested checklist, but no resolution for a quarter. And then they quarter have the green building resolution. Let's see, this one is, do you have an environmental resource inventory? And 62.5% do. Do you have a green business program? So 37.5 have a green business program. An open space trust fund. So 62.5% of us do, but only a quarter have a space report. And this one was very interesting. Do you hold recycling swap fix-it events? You know, the shredding or electronics recycling, repair cafe and things like that. And a great majority did. So I'm hoping to find out more about those activities. And there are a lot of other questions. But here we're asking about green infrastructure, you know, what kind of green infrastructure you might have. So 62.5% have green infrastructure installations in their municipality. 50% have complete streets kind of implemented. Trouble seeing it. 12%, 12.5 have one but have not implemented, and then we have the rest do not have a complete streets policy. So that's the end of that. I just wanted to share that, and having this problem with not being able to stop sharing. Hold on a second. But if you want to go ahead and show your video screen, there we go, stop share. Then, and maybe we could have one person from each municipality that's represented here can tell us what kind of things they're working on. And I'm going to pick on my chair from Maplewood Environmental Advisory Committee first. Bob McCoy, if you could give an update on what Maplewood's been working on lately.
Yeah, actually, yeah, hello everybody. This is actually very timely because we're both working on updating our town's master plan and our environmental resources inventory. And one of the things that's become really apparent is that the old versions really did not take into consideration the impact of climate change. And I think one of our efforts will be to work to think that through, to identify and work solidly into the plans as solid as we can. What we need to be thinking about, what our basic environmental issues are, what our resources and our really our liabilities at times, and how to work those into planning going forward. And one of the things that I think is actually we're trying as a committee, the Environmental Advisory Committee, which is our environmental commission, is trying to do the environmental resources inventory ourselves rather than handing it off to a consultant to do. And by doing that, we're having to engage in it much more than we would otherwise. And that's actually been a bit of a struggle. It's easy to throw that off to somebody else and do that. But when you do that, you also lose some of your local input on it. One other big issue that's been in town, completely unrelated to, well, not completely, nothing's unrelated to planning and that, but we had a long struggle over the issue of installing an artificial turf field in one of our parks that has been a multi-use park in one of our most environmentally and financially stressed parts of our town. That went to a vote, and it was voted down, so that we're now back to working on the plan. One of the reasons I bring that up is that I think the environmental community has been a bit lax in understanding the impact of artificial turf fields. They're full of contaminants. They have an appeal to them for some reasons, but for a variety of reasons. But I think we failed to recognize the contaminants in them. Their impact on stormwater is actually fairly serious, and then there are environmental justice issues related to them, as well as they're expensive, and the question of is this what our budget priority should be? So those are a couple of the things that we've been working on.
And we're also going for a full year-round leaf blower ban.
Yeah.
So that's just another battle that we're working on. So Winifred, would you like to update us on what your commission is working on in Newark?
Sure. In terms of the environmental resource inventory, we came out with that in May, and with a focus strictly, well, mostly on environmental justice issues. So in terms of, children and the urban landscape, more so than, outside natural resources, but mostly focusing on problems that, urban cities face. And in terms, the question would be, what is it that we are not working on, basically, because it's been so busy. And mostly our focus has been with PVSC power plant in the Ironbound that they want to build, and then also the Aris sludge facility. And so we've been testifying and, at different hearings, attending a lot of hearings, demonstrations. We've been meeting with, the governor's staff, the first lady also. With PVSC, we formed a committee of mostly women and trying to get the support of the first lady so she can advocate for us, with the governor. And it was put on hold before the elections. And now that the elections are over, we're going to start meeting again. And also we've been having protests and demonstration in collaboration with Make the Roads New Jersey, Clean Water Action, ICC, of course, New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance, and a few other organizations targeting the Plan Amazon buildings at the Port Authority at the seaport. So basically, it's a secret plan that they were working on without any community input or transparency. So they were supposed to sign it, have signed it on November 1st. And because of all the demonstrations and protests, now it's been moved to the beginning of the year. And so, we're just asking for community input and transparency. And we had a protest on November 18th at the World Trade Center. And some of us submitted video testimonies, and they actually did play them at the hearing. And also now the Weequahic Park Association, we're back in action, full throttle, now that the community building, the new renovated community center building is in use. And so we're going to start off again with Weequahic Park Association and what we can do with Weequahic Park and how we can improve it, that sort of thing. But basically, it's always something, switching stations, whether it's, the truck emissions, the white chemical plant came up again. A reporter from Washington Post came and, wanted to interview a few of us in reference to the whole white chemical plant contamination building that was on Freeling House and then also all the truck emissions. And we also had a clean air march at the Ironbound. When was it? About a week ago, where Cynthia, the other co-chair of the Newark Environmental Commission, and then we spoke at that rally. So it's never ending. And we're looking also for new commissioners to join because our numbers are dwindling. And so we're looking for younger people, to join us. And basically that's it.
All right, thank you. That's a lot.
I know.
So Sarah O'Farrell, I see you're from Verona. Did you want to tell us what's going on in Verona?
Yes. I'm overwhelmed hearing everything too that's going on in Newark. Wow. I didn't know how I didn't know about those protests because I like going to protests.
You're always welcome.
I'll be in touch. I'm gonna be fast so everyone can go. But one thing I do want to mention is that for 2 years we've been working on our Stormwater Ordinance, and ours was passed unanimously in March, and ours is more strict than the state ordinance, which is good. And of course, as someone else mentioned before, everything is connected. We have a tree ordinance as well, which we're continuing to work on, and we have had many problems. And we are hoping to get staff on board to have a certified tree expert or licensed tree expert. I'm not sure of the acronym because that's been an issue in town. I have a personal experience with that and somebody trying to do it without a permit and not knowing I helped write the tree ordinance. So that was uncomfortable. We also have a new anti-idling resolution that was just adopted. And I'm a retired teacher, so I'm really focusing on education and awareness because it's unreal. I don't know how I know it, but the majority of people are completely unaware and clueless about idling, and they want to cut down trees and then they complain about the flooding. And I try with my education. We have a lot of other things. We do a lot of cleanups and we get a nice turnout of people for that and a lot of other things, but we're busy. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And Carolee Ball, would you like to tell us what's going on in Glen Ridge?
Sure. Hi. I'll also be really quick. So we were part of the community choice aggregation. It's been going on now for a few years. We participated in the Essex Hudson Greenway. We just are launching a community composting subscription service where you can either drop off or have your stuff picked up, and it goes a little bit further than backyard composting because it's dairy and meat. So we're hoping that'll be successful. We just got a Sustainable Jersey grant for 10K for a waste reduction program. So we're looking, we started recycling plastic bags and styrofoam within this past year. And we want to get a good push through mailers, an education push. And we have a community garden. We are creating a bike lane down Ridgewood Ave. So if any of our nearby neighbors, can bike through our town now, we're going to have parking on one side only. I'm sure that'll raise a lot of comments. But anyway, we'll be a healthier community. Safe Roads to School, quarterly newspaper in conjunction with our library, just to get the word out about different things, way to connect our group, our environmental group with the public. We have an eco fair that has been on hold. We're going to do it again, but a simplified version this year. It's been too much work. And then the last thing is we've just been working with Quiet Communities and a group called, I just learned about, Advocates for Transforming Landscaping in New Jersey, and they focus on leaf blower ordinances. And I just wanted to say one last thing. I agree with Sarah about the education and awareness. And it would be really helpful at a county level, to just have a message, like, we've all been through COVID, health is so important. It has to do with climate change. And it's hard for volunteers to get all of this going, to find the money to hire, to create the graphics for mailers, and all of that. So I just wanted to put that out there. There's anything that could be kind of a county level top down with just the messaging across all of our communities. Some of these things, I think it would just be great. It would bring us all together, as you were saying. Thank you.
That's a great idea. It's really good. Let's see, Gregory Babula, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, from Bloomfield. Would you like to tell us what's been going on there?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I don't think my camera's working, but I see my background.
Yeah.
Well, very brief. We are working on a ERI. We've never had one before. So that's currently in progress. We're hoping to have that done in the next few months. We did retain, the township retained a engineering firm for that because we didn't think that was something we could take on ourselves, especially since we've never had one before. So that's pretty much the news, the big thing that we're working on. Other than that, we're still trying to determine what our priorities are going to be going forward. As a environmental commission, we kind of congealed only within like the last 2 years or so. We've had some turnover of members and taken on a few new members this year. And so we're trying to find our footing and get a sense for where we need to devote our limited attention to that there are things we can reasonably tackle. And I think once we have the ERI, we can start having a more active voice in the planning process in town. I think that will give us a little bit more to do. But these forums are great to get some ideas and see what everyone else is working on. My personal priority would be a leaf blower ordinance, but of course, for that you need political support. So I'd be curious to see what some of the experiences are of other towns in terms of the successes they've been able to gain with mitigating leaf blowers, either outright or curtailing their use. So perhaps that's something we could discuss at a future forum. So I think a concerted approach on that would definitely be advantageous for those of us who don't have it yet.
Sure, I can put you in touch with the coalition that was referenced earlier. I forget what its association. I forget what their name they came up with, but there are a bunch of people statewide that have been working in various municipalities on that. So I can put you in touch with them. They have a lot of resources, things that they can share with you. Let's see, Mike Brick, are you from West Orange? Is that correct? Wait, you're muted.
There you go. Here.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, Joe McCartney is our rep for Essex County. And I think Joe's on. Is he on the
There's Joe,
on
yes.
the call? Because
Joe?
he's doing some things also that we should talk about.
All right, are you there, Joe?
If he's not, I'll cover for him.
I know you
So-
covered for him.
if he's not on, he does a lot of work, and he's our open spaces commissioner. And West Orange was faced with buying the Rock Spring Country Club last year or 2 years ago, which we did do, which was hundreds of acres, and it was a $12 million situation. And that's been running privately or the town contracting with a manager. And the town just used open spaces to buy a giant chunk of land from another country club in town, I think 70 some acres, that we must preserve, because if commercial developers had gotten hold of this land, it would unbalance us as a residential community, and it would add so much more to the cost of the Board of Education's budget, which of course is related to our tax budget. So some of the other things we've been doing is we had a wonderful program that got national recognition about cleaning up our ponds in town with floating islands. And I think Angic, you're part of that with us.
Great.
And we built these floating islands, and then COVID shut us down because the kids were very active at the high school to build the islands with the STEM program, and they were very excited about it. So Amy Rowe is our coordinator from Rutgers for water in Essex, I think in Passaic counties. So she's been working with us, and we have aquatic plants to go in, which we had to delay. And we have the approval to put them into 2 different ponds in town. And the students will monitor the water in the pond to determine how effective these aquatic plants are. And we would add more to it. Tree ordinance, we tightened up our tree ordinance and found some holes in it, so that the tree people must have a license in town and be aware of our tree ordinances. We changed it so that it's not unilateral about just taking down trees, that the town has input into it. And the town forester would go see them and give them approval to take down the trees rather than just have them do it themselves. We did a cleanup of the Rollway River because we're the headwaters of the east and west branch of the Rollway Rivers. And our water runs through the reservation and it dumps into Milburn, which puts them underwater. And we did a survey, and we have 5 square miles in that water in that area between our 2 mountains that feeds the Rollway River. And if we had 6 inches of rain with 50% runoff, we have 7.5 billion gallons of water running down through the reservation. And that's the cause of inundation in Milburn. And that wave of water just goes further down through the Rollway River system and impacts probably the other 25 or so towns in it. So those are the few things off the top of my head that we've been doing. Angic has been a real help to us. Joe McCartney has been working on a section of land, 5 or 6 acres that we bought, that we call the Rock at the top of Second Mountain on Route 10. And he just put in pollinator bees into that area. And we planted hundreds of trees in it, brought in topsoil, and we brought in a field of milkweed that's growing nicely. And we try to keep it weeded so that it grows well. And there are monarchs coming back. So that's just an oversight. I didn't make a full list, but just to give you some of the things that we've been working on. And we've had a few people leave our environmental commission, and I've got some others coming on board. So it's a creative effort. And we still haven't had face-to-face meetings yet, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in the near future, even with this new strain of COVID, who knows? So that's an overview, and that's about as much as I can think of right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Jennifer Duckworth is from Milburn. Do you want to, down the river from you? So Jennifer, did you want to tell us what's going on in Milburn? Do you have any updates there? Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't get my microphone off mute, but
Right.
I believe that we have Reed Kim on the
Okay.
line from
Great.
Milburn.
Thank you. Yes, I see that. Reed, could you let us know what's going on in Milburn?
You're muted, Reed.
Or we can maybe come back to him. And there are a couple people, I'm not sure which town they're from. If
Can we
they're
hear from Montclair? Can we hear
already
from
been spoken from.
Suzanne and Ben in Montclair?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I can play, please. Who would like to speak for Montclair?
Ben
Ben or
Ben.
Suzanne?
Speaker. I don't know. Is Ben here?
Yes.
Speak
There he
in-
is.
Ben's in the house.
Ben's-
Hey, Ben. I'll speak one voice. I'm going to channel him. Also, Janine is here. So Janine chime in as well. Just a couple of things we'll share. We're working on some climate action planning. That's a big focus of ours this year, especially in the areas of energy and transportation, which I'm sure for all of us, that's the focus. So we hope to have a plan developed in the next 6 months. We're also launching some energy efficiency programs. So we're working with the with Bob, with the Sustainable Energy Alliance, Essex Alliance, sorry, to launch a pilot energy efficiency program called Energy Solutions, which we're excited about for residents, and also Comfort Partners, if you've heard of that, for low-income residents. We're going to be launching that as well. I know in Newark, you're having success with that, Winnie. Let's see, from a waste standpoint, and Janine is our resident expert in this, we started styrofoam recycling this summer, which we're very excited about, every other week. And we also drafted a proposal for a composting drop-off composting, similar to what I think Carolee was speaking about. So we're hoping this year the township will implement that. We are also updating our tree ordinance, and I think, given what we're talking about tonight, that's one of those types of ordinances that can always be revisited and needs to be revisited. And so we're going to be looking at that and making that stricter. And we also sent a stormwater management proposal to our township with our recommendations recently. So we're hoping to get involved in next steps around that. So tonight was very relevant. So thank you for that. That's all I have for now, unless anyone else from Montclair wants to share anything.
Thank you. So is there anybody else? Is Reed? Reed, are you?
Oh, hi there. Sorry, I had to leave the, I'm sorry, I had
Not
to
at all.
leave the call.
Not at all. If you could let us know, give us an update on what is going on in Milburn, what kind of things you're working on there.
Yes, I actually, to Suzanne's comment, I know we're in the process of, if it hasn't been formally submitted yet, there's a stormwater ordinance also being looked at here. I wasn't working on that directly, but I think that's sort of in transit right now. We have had a member looking at the leaf blower question during this year. So that's sort of an ongoing discussion point. I've spent some time looking at the open space issue. We're one of the townships in Essex County that does not have an open space fund or mechanism. So I've looked into that as well. And we also have a active, our chairperson has kind of led the way on a composting pilot project as well, which I think in our last meeting, we allocated sort of the last of our budget to hopefully expanding that to additional families in town. So those are some examples. And then of course, with Ida and so forth, I think people have been Various people on the EC have been very involved in that, I believe, and reaching out with the town and the town's discussions about that. And then finally, I guess something that's been on the agenda is also a invasive species ordinance, and so that's also being looked at.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Now, I don't know, Kaylin, Bruno, and Sophie Sawyer. I'm not sure which municipalities you're from, if you've already been spoken for, but please feel free to share.
Yeah, we're actually both from Bloomfield, and Greg did a good job summarizing our activities. So thank you.
Yeah, hi. I'm new to the Environmental Commission. I've been involved in, the environment and helping out with different kinds of, protests from, I remember the Newark incinerator in the 1980s and different kinds of events. And this is the first time I'm on the commission. I'm excited to meet everyone and get to know everyone and see what everyone's doing. Unfortunately, Bloomfield's a bit behind everyone, but it's so inspiring hearing from everyone. I'd like to hear more, the Bloomfield, there's not very many open spaces left. And I'm concerned with all the tree cutting because in my particular area, asthma is up and it's a big concern. And I just want to thank everyone for the support. Thanks again.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Well, you'll be having the Essex Hudson Greenway going through your town, so that'll be a fun opportunity.
Yeah. I just had a root canal today too, so I'm a bit out of it.
All right. Well, if anybody else has something that they would like to share.
Ann has.
I'm sorry. Ann, go ahead. Oh, Ann.
Hi, I'm from Caldwell.
Sorry, I'm just thinking of you as like being co-chair.
I know.
I forgot to
my
think
two
of you and
hats.
your other
Just
chair.
to the lady from Bloomfield, I just want to share, one of our open spaces was a building that we raised. Okay, and it is now the site, and all of you probably know this, it's the Caldwell Pollinator Garden. So this is a wonderful, beautiful gem. So even if you think you don't have space, you do. So you have to think differently. Something can be made open space with some difficulty, but it can be done. So it's all good. Okay.
At Bloomfield College.
Yeah, that's true. There's place.
One thing, if I could just say one thing as a concern is, a lot of people, especially in the administration of the townships, they really don't understand native plants and other.
Well, that's your job now.
Just explain it.
You just made yourself a job.
Unfortunately, since I joined the commission, my house has been fined for having, they call them weeds and not native plants. So that's something our town needs to understand. And, yes, we're trying, and I will do my best to try to, one thing nice about the native plants is they'll come back. So I did have milkweed. I had the perennials. I had the the milkweed, the Joe Pye weed.
That's a pollinator garden. Yes.
As a pollinator garden for monarch caterpillars, they need that common milkweed, or they need the milkweed patches. And
yes, so that's all good. You have a start right there. So we have been continuing our pollinator garden. And part of that, we were able to receive part of that is recertification from Sustainable Jersey this year, which is wonderful. And last year, actually 2019, we received a $20,000 grant for green infrastructure from Sustainable Jersey. So it wasn't until this spring that we completed 2 rain gardens. So I'm thrilled about that. And we're hoping to extend that into the community with Rutgers did the analysis. And so we have other possible sites. So that's one thing that we're aiming for this year. I'm hoping that this year we're going to do something with trees. This past October, we gave away trees as part of a mini Earth Day and rain barrels to our residents, which that worked out fairly well. We're also looking into energy aggregation. So thank you, Steve Neal from Verona is helping us with that. And we also we broached the topic of leaf blowers with the council, and it's a baby step. Okay, so maybe if everybody in the county would say, yay, we all want, some restrictions on leaf blowers, that would be helpful to the whole county. Okay, just want to put this out there. There's a bill that's coming up in the assembly that really needs all of our support for the pollinators. And I put it in the chat. It happens to be 2070. It's already passed the Senate. And this is the neonic bill, the pesticides bill. So if you all could just make one phone call, one phone call to Speaker Coughlin, and then another to Sweeney, Mr. Sweeney, for the Liberty State Park. That's an open space area that I don't know if any of you, I presume most of you have been there, but it has to be made for everybody. It can't be restricted for special groups. So those two bills are really, really important if you could support them.
And I just want to say, Ann, put that information in the chat. So if you want to get that, what she's talking about, you can write that, you can just copy that from her chat right there, and you can save that and you'll get her information.
Yeah, that'd be just 2 phone calls. And they're very nice. All the people and all their staffs are just wonderful, very nice people. Okay. Also, I might bring this up with you. Have you thought of approaching your green teams in your houses of faith? I've just developed a relationship now with many. We have a West Essex Ministerial Association, and many of the groups have green teams. So we've been partnering with them for a couple of things. One thing that we did do, we gave out seeds, pollinator seeds, packets of seeds, worked together to do that. So fingers crossed, gave out actually including the church, 500 seed packets. So fingers crossed, we're going to have lots of pollinator plants in the spring. So that's an easy thing to do. And that's a nice way to advertise what you're doing on the commission too. Gives you a bonus, and the pollinators win too. So I think that's about it. I also want to take this time for 1 minute to thank Sheila. She did all the extras for this presentation this evening. So thank you, Sheila. To Tara for working with the county to get our wonderful speakers there.
Yes,
and to
thank you.
Karina for having our wonderful speaker at the beginning of the program. So kudos to all of you folks.
And
So
thanks
thank
again to
you,
our
thank you,
wonderful
thank you.
speakers. And thank you, Essex OEM has stuck around till the bitter end. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, you all.
Good night.